All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. Now, it's almost that time of the year as we are just a matter of days away from the 2022 version of the NFL draft. And with that said, what position in the NFL is looked at more than the quarterback position? There's no position in sports that is under the microscope more than the starting quarterback, and for good reason, as it's safe to say that NFL starting quarterbacks are paid very handsomely, while more quarterbacks have been named as the MVP of the league and the Super Bowl MVP as well, compared to any other position in football. Now, we've also seen our fair share of quarterbacks taken in the first round of the NFL draft as teams are looking for that next phenom in the hopes that he will turn around the fortunes of their respective franchise. To this day, the first round of the NFL draft is still the gold standard for many quarterbacks. And when I say the first round, I'm talking about the 1983 draft, as we saw John Elway, Jim Kelly, Dan Marino be three of the six quarterbacks selected that year, while Tony Eason, who was also taken in the first round that year, helped the Patriots reach the Super Bowl in 85. Now, the first round class from 2004 wasn't that shabby either, as we saw Eli Manning, Philip Rivers, and Ben Roethlisberger all get taken in that first round, four combined Super Bowls with them, and there's a strong possibility that all three of them head into Canton. But for every Hall of Fame signal caller, we've seen our fair share of first round quarterbacks fizzle out. That includes the likes of Achilles Smith, Ryan Leaf, and Jamarcus Russell, just to name a few. But with that said, are there any future NFL star quarterbacks that are going to be selected in this year's draft? And I'm not going to be talking about this by myself this evening. I have the pleasure of having two astute gentlemen when it comes to the world of sports joining me. I have my partners AJ and Andy. Good evening, fellas. How are you doing?
Fantastic. How you doing, William?
Good
Can't,
evening, William.
can't complain one bit. Can't complain one bit. It seems like, and it wasn't by choice. It just was by accident. But it seems like every time that we get on here, I have a Detroit Pistons jersey behind me.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Now, one thing I wanted to talk about, and I got several quarterbacks that I want to get your opinions on that are probably either going to be taken in the first round or taken close to the first round in the draft. I want to start with Kenny Pickett out of Pitt. 6'3", 217 pounds. He was a 4-year starter. He became a household name during the 2020, or let me rephrase that. He really came into his own rather here in 2020. He passed more than 4,300 yards this past college football season, the 2021 college football season rather. He also had 42 TDs. He helped Pitt win the ACC for the first time in school history. He was also the ACC's Offensive Player of the Year. Now, he knows how to make plays with his arm as well as his feet. But, typically there's always going to be scouts that have some negative things to say about players because no scout is going to give, a prospect a glowing review unless, he's a quote unquote can't miss. And even with some of those glowing reviews, we've seen guys fizzle out regardless of position. But you hear some scouts, they're worried about his hand size and his ability to throw the football in the cold weather. And for me, I'm looking at it. Didn't Kenny Pickett play his college ball at Pitt? It's not exactly Miami come November, and having to have the ability to grip the football, throw it in that bad weather. He looked pretty good doing it. And for me, in my personal opinion, I don't think he's going to be a star right away. I think it's going to take its time, and I think it's going to also come down to what team takes him. So I just want to get your thoughts on Kenny Pickett and how you think his career can pan out in the NFL.
Well, William, this draft as a whole, as far as QBs go, is a bit underwhelming. I think we've been blessed the last previous years, dating all the way back to Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. The last few years, we've had some very, very good quarterbacks come out. I don't see anybody that really jumps off the page at me, and this includes Kenny Pickett. The big question with Kenny Pickett is, like you said, he come into his own this year. But if you look at his 3 previous years, his statistics, he's averaging almost 13 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. What very pedestrian. What changed? What changed with Kenny Pickett? And they're leaning on hand size as being something that is not they don't like. But that's really, if you can make the throws, hand size doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You could be out there in a purple tutu if you're making the throws. They're going to pay you. They're going to give you a bag. So with Kenny Pickett, he's jittery in the pocket and he throws to the perimeters. He's a good runner. You know, he's a guy that you can run the RPO with and stuff. But my question is, what happened in his senior year that really made his numbers go up like this, that shot him up the boards? Is it the coach, the coaching style? What changed with him? And if I'm an NFL GM, I'm probably calling his coaches and I'm asking, what was the difference? Is it something he did, changed his style of play? Or is it something that the coaches did? And if he's not in the right system, it could be an issue. Do you know, if depending on which team he goes to?
Well, Pitt did have a different OC this past college football season. His name is escaping me right now. That definitely factored into it. On top of that, you know, the ACC as a whole has never been strong from top to bottom. And, you know, not trying to like knock Kenny Pickett, but you know what? He beat up on the teams that he was supposed to beat up on. And I mean, we saw him destroy Wake Forest in the ACC championship game. Wake Forest did not have a good defense this season, and you know, there were several games where the Demon Deacons scored close to, if not more than 50 points, and they still lost. So that gives you an idea of what he was dealing with. He sat out his bowl game against Michigan State, and of course, that is the current trend right now in college football. You know, a lot of guys are sitting out their bowl game unless it's the playoff. Can't really blame them with all of the money that's at stake. I mean, just look at David Ajabu, who feels so bad for him, you know, ruptured his Achilles at his pro day. But that's a whole nother story. But, you know, so you can't blame Kenny Pickett for that. But nonetheless, you know, he did go out there against Power Five competition and he was able to light it up. For me, you know, and I'm going to talk about the quarterbacks as a whole, but, you know, it's going to come down to what system that he goes to, what system that he's put in. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for him. And I think, you know, I'm looking at some teams that could potentially take him in the first round. Carolina at number 6. If he goes to the Panthers, it's one of those for me, like Trevor Lawrence going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Great talent, but wrong team. Because I just don't see Matt Rule as a guy at the pro level that's going to get it done with at the quarterback position. We've seen how many quarterbacks he's gone through in a brief period of time. Seattle, that could be the team that's intriguing for me because you look at the Seahawks, they picked ninth. They have that pick from the Denver Broncos, courtesy of the Russell Wilson trade. And for me, you look at it, you know, you have Drew Lock on the roster right now, and for whatever reason, I'm not sold on the Seahawks just going into this season saying, "Hey, you know what? We're going to be gung ho and put everything behind Drew Lock." Yes, I know it's a rebuild for the Seahawks, but I just don't see it right there. Houston, maybe. I mean, how sold are they on Davis Mills? I'm not sure. New Orleans, you know, Jameis Winston is coming back, but he has an injury history. So
Oh,
are you really going to be strong with him there? And then finally, for me, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, Pittsburgh, they're picking at number 20. And let's be realistic. Who knows more about Kenny Pickett than the Pittsburgh Steelers? And no, he's not Dan Marino, but of course, we remember almost 4 decades ago where Dan Marino was sitting right there for the Steelers. They knew everything about him from Pitt, and they passed on him. And of course, the rest is history. So I definitely think he's a first round. He gets a first round grade, but it's just going to come down to fit because if you go to the wrong team, it ruins you. And then it's going, and then people are going, well, you know, this kid's a bust, X, Y, and Z. So that's how I feel about Kenny Pickett. It comes down to fit.
Well, I think you're right. I think his best fit is going to be with Pete Carroll in Seattle, if that's what they're looking for, because Russell Wilson was a mobile quarterback. He's a guy that can move around, get out of the pocket, and make plays, and that's what Kenny Pickett can do. He's a very mobile quarterback, and he's capable of getting out of the pocket and making plays. But like you said, if he goes to a place like Carolina with Kevin Rule, if the offense doesn't suit that, because he's not always comfortable in the pocket, and he works better when he's allowed to get outside of it and make plays. That's going to be an issue. You got to kind of tailor the offense to suit the talent that you have, and some coaches don't do that. And if that's the case, that's going to be bad for Kenny.
Well, guys, let me just interject here for a second and ask a dumb homer question. Okay, why not the Detroit Lions? Right? Why not the Lions? I hate to say that they have any kind of set offense. I know he's more of a spread offense kind of guy, but I'm just asking an honest question, and maybe it's a homer question, but why not Detroit? They're at number 2, and Goff isn't their guy, so why not pick up a quarterback or two and have them compete for the gig, right? What am I missing?
Well, my thing is this. I agree with you from that standpoint, but it's just a dollars and cents scenario because of Jared Goff's contract. So you figure this guy, he's making a lot of money. It was just that, in that Stafford trade, the Lions were able in their mind, like, okay, you know what? Let's get rid of one ridiculously big contract for quarterback and in exchange get a contract that's ridiculous, just not as ridiculous as Matt Stafford's deal. And of course, we saw how that worked out for the Lions. So I think that's the only thing that's going to hold them back. And I think Dan Campbell is hell bent on, solidifying the team around Jared Goff. Me personally, I don't believe in Jared Goff. I think his best years were with the Rams. And of course, the year that Jared Goff got to the Super Bowl, what happened? The Rams had a solid D, and of course, they had a solid running game with Todd Gurley. But then when Todd Gurley injured that knee, we saw what Jared Goff looked like. And to me, this is just my personal opinion. Jared Goff, to me, I think he got shell shocked after that Super Bowl because you saw him, against in that game with the Patriots, and of course, we know Bill Belichick over the years. It's like he can just toy with a young quarterback. And in that game, Jared Goff, he looked like a deer in headlights. And in my opinion, I don't think he's ever recovered from that. So I'm with you. From the rational standpoint, it makes total sense for the Lions to go to a quarterback. But I just don't. I just think from a dollar and cents standpoint, they're not going to do it. If they do it, it'll probably be much later in the draft, like rounds 4 down.
Well, two things there to that, William. And I have no faith in Goff either. I don't think he's bringing any kind of hope to Detroit. But I don't think. Who do the Lions pick up? Again, just from a homer standpoint, you need a quarterback, and you got a bad contract with Goff. Where else is your money going to? You don't have any other big name players. You got no other big name players, and if you do, you want to throw somebody out there, throw some name out there, you're wasting your money because there's so many holes on that team. It's so poorly run. We could talk all damn night about the Lions, honestly, and I don't want to do that.
Right.
But, I'm looking at the draft order and all these teams, all these top 10 teams in the draft, they all need QBs, and the top 10 QBs are not top 10 QBs. The swamp is pretty dry,
Yeah, this is a year where if you're looking for a franchise quarterback, this ain't the year. And
right.
the problem is like if you're a team that's picking as early as Detroit is, theoretically, you can come out of this smelling like a rose because you have that team that says, you know what, I need to move up about 10 or 15 spots to get my guy at quarterback. There's nobody jumping off the table like that. And of course, a team like the Lions, you could really set yourself up. You can move back in the draft, still get value, and then on top of that, get at least one more first out of it. And because of that, that's why, we saw Seattle get the package that they did for Russell Wilson because, we saw so many guys moving around, like so many teams moving up and down to try to, get veteran quarterbacks. And that just lets you know that a lot of teams aren't really high on the quarterbacks this year. I mean, look at Washington. Washington was willing to trade for Carson Wentz in spite of, how his season ended with the Indianapolis Colts, and then even the things that were said by the Colts front office about Carson Wentz after their collapse to end the season, even before they even traded him. So, I mean, that just lets you know that a lot of teams out there really aren't high on these quarterbacks this year. It doesn't mean that some of these guys aren't, they don't have potential, but I'm totally with, some of those teams because there's a lot of what ifs in this draft. I mean, you look at Malik Willis out of Liberty. He's 6'1", he's 219. But, part of me feels like, could he be this year's Mike Mamula? And of course, Mike Mamula was not a quarterback, but if you go back to the mid 90s, Mike Mamula was a workout warrior at the combine, and the Eagles used a first round pick on him, and he never quite panned out. But I mean, you look at Willis this past year at Liberty, 27 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. But for me, the game that sticks out with Malik Willis is the game against Ole Miss, where he went 16 to 25 passing with 0 touchdowns and 3 picks. And for me, it's always, especially when you have players from the smaller schools, regardless of position, you want to see how they play against the Power Five schools. I always think back to the year that Khalil Mack got drafted, and he had that big game when he played for Buffalo against Ohio State at the Horseshoe, and that basically solidified him being a first round pick. And for Malik Willis, you go back, you look at the rest of the competition that he faced, didn't have a lot of competition, throughout the year. It was that Ole Miss game that I'm looking at. He can throw a great deep ball. It's one of those, yeah, he looks great in 7-on-7 drills and shorts and a t-shirt, but I'm like, what's going to happen when you put the pads on and you have to deal with the game speed of the NFL?
Well, Malik Willis he's they classify him as like a raw talent, right? Huge up ceiling. But it's exactly what you said. He beats up on teams like Old Dominion. But when you go and you play against the big boys in the SEC and other Power 5 conferences, you can't have a 0 touchdown, 3 interception night and sell me as, oh, he's got this great ceiling. Now, I know he's got talent and he has the ability, but boy, he's not anybody you would take in the first 3 rounds, not when he's a project like that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, for me, he's probably going to go in the first 2 rounds. And I think about it because Bill Polian said this once upon a time. It only takes one team to do something very stupid in the draft, and then you get a lot of other GMs pushing the panic button. It's like when you see a run on quarterbacks because teams are like, they feel like they're not going to get a guy. And I think about the Giants several years ago with Daniel Jones. They got suckered because Dave Gettleman said, well, if we didn't take Daniel Jones, somebody else was going to take him right there. I'm like, okay, fine, because he had to me, I thought he was a 4th round grade coming out, and he's played like a 4th round quarterback, at this point. But nonetheless, there's going to be somebody that gets trigger happy, so to speak, and wants to make a move to get a quarterback because they're worried about somebody else, quote unquote, taking him, and especially with this year where it's really slim picking, so to speak, at the quarterback position. Just like it was with Kenny Pickett, I could see Pittsburgh in on him at some point. And I keep bringing up Pittsburgh because I'm sorry, but I really feel that the Steelers are going to have a problem selling season ticket packages to their fans, telling their fan base that Mitch Trubisky is going to be the starting quarterback going into the season. I know he helped the Bears get to the playoffs, but I'm like, you simply don't believe in that guy. I could also see the Giants or Seattle taking him in the 2nd round, maybe not the 1st round, because I mean the Giants, they got questions about Daniel Jones. I know they brought in Tyrod Taylor. He's a stopgap guy. They got a new GM, new head coach, you name it. I could see them taking him in round 2, maybe as a project. And also Seattle again, because with Seattle, they have four picks in the top 41. They got, several 2nd round picks where that could be more of a value pick, but definitely where Seattle picks in the 1st round, I'm not taking him.
I could see him being a value pick. He's an exciting player. He's got a ton of hype. he's a guy that, like you said, in Pittsburgh, he'll put butts in the seats. You know, you pick him up, and then there's gonna be all this hype about, will he be the starter over Trubisky? The fans are gonna want him, and he gets out there, and you're gonna be able to sell tickets with Malik Willis. Does that equate to wins? I'm not sold on it.
Again, to me, just like we talked about with Kenny Pickett, and I agree with you, he's a project. And it's going to come down to what team that you put him around. And I think in the case of both Pickett and Willis, if they went to Pittsburgh, it would be a good scenario because listen, if nothing else, Pittsburgh can play D. And you have TJ Watt, you have Minka Fitzpatrick, you have Devin Bush on the defensive side of the ball, along with Cam Hayward. So the Steelers are going to play D and keep you in the game. Offensively, they can run the ball with Najee Harris. So, they have to get back to that physicality. And I think it's going to give an opportunity for a younger quarterback to have an opportunity to develop. Where a guy like Malik Willis worries me, and we've seen it with several quarterbacks, is okay, some people get a lot very hyped about these quarterbacks in their rookie years as far as what they're doing, X, Y, and Z. But you got to also remember, teams don't have game film on them. So once those teams get the game film on them and they're able to make those adjustments, would a guy like Malik Willis have the same success? That's one thing that I worry about with him. Arm talent is there, but I mean, we've seen plenty of quarterbacks over the years who had the best, all of the arm talent in the world. Jeff George is a guy that comes to mind, but it doesn't mean that, he's going to have a quote unquote phenomenal year. Our career, I know Jeff George did enough to stay in the NFL for more than 10 years, but still, just having a solid arm ain't going to get it done.
No, I agree with you. There's been a lot of comparisons with him to Lamar Jackson and RG3. But if you look at a guy like RG3, once the tape come out and the defenses knew what to do against him,
That was it.
that was it. It was done. And him running so much, I mean, it's history. You know what I mean? That he the injuries and stuff started to mount. The defenses knew what he was doing, flushed him from the pocket, and it wasn't sustainable. So
Yeah, I don't see it with him either. I mean, I don't see it, with Matt Corral either. I mean, Matt Corral, he's 6'2", 212 out of Ole Miss. He has the heart, but I'm not sure about his ability as far as him being a long-term starter in the NFL. For me, unless there is a run on quarterbacks, I don't see Corral, being a first round pick. But I do feel that he could make a career out of it as a backup because we always have some backup quarterbacks that make a career out of it for like 10 years or so in the NFL. You think about a guy like Bubby Brister. Steve DeBerg was another guy who was a journeyman. Most recently, Chase Daniel. They do just enough as far as being able to hang around in the league for a decade or so. I see that with Matt Corral. He played hard at Ole Miss, and of course, Lane Kiffin. I think he was a perfect quarterback for Lane Kiffin's system at Ole Miss. But talking about him being a first round quarterback, I don't see it unless, like we said before, teams start making a run and start doing something foolish in round one.
well, I don't see him going in round one, but I could see him. I could see him having success at the next level. This is a guy that I feel he's probably the most pro ready, having played in the SEC, having played the top competition in college football his entire career. And I mean, coming out of high school, he had offers from Alabama. So if he's the guy that Nick Saban wants, he can probably ball. So I'm a little higher on Matt Corral than it sounds like you are, William. But that said, I would never take him in the first. I wouldn't take any of these quarterbacks in the first round. But I could see him being a value pick, and I could see him being in the league quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's the thing. You can make a career as a backup quarterback, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just going to come down to somebody doing something very stupid. I think back to 2009, of course, when Josh McDaniels traded back into the first round to take Tim Tebow, a guy that everybody said was a third or fourth round quarterback. And of course, the rest was history there. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. I look at him and I just don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. But at the end of the day, I just don't see it for him.
All right, fair enough.
Now, moving right along, another guy I want to talk about, Sam Howell, out of North Carolina. He's 6'1", he's 218. There's some people that are comparing him to Baker Mayfield. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Now, Howell, he had a strong start to his career at North Carolina under Mac Brown. He was really like the first big recruit that Mac Brown got to come to Chapel Hill when he returned. I really think that, he took a step back last season because the Tar Heels came into the last college football season with a ton of expectations. They were the team that I picked to win the ACC at the beginning of the year. They flamed out. I feel that number one, he could have benefited if he stayed in school for another year. I think he came out because he probably looked at it and said, "Hey, you know what? There's not a lot of quality quarterbacks in this draft, and I got a shot to go early." So I think this is why he's here. Me personally, I darn sure don't trust him. I don't see him going in the first round. I could see him being a guy. He'll show you a flash here or there as far as what he can do. Long term future, I simply don't see it for him as a starter.
I
He,
agree.
I think we've started to see the trend. And for the longest time, William, the NFL was pro style quarterback in the pocket, not mobile, and all that run pass option. That's all for college. Well, we've started to see with Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and stuff. It's starting to evolve into the NFL. You need that to some extent. You got to have that threat. You don't need to be running a ton, but you at least have to keep the defense honest. Let's say.
Mhm.
Sam Howell is not the guy to do that. He is not mobile. He's like a sack of bricks out there. He is not a guy that's going to go run for a first down when you need it. And if he tries, they're going to get him. He's just incredibly slow. And so while his mechanics are really good and he's a great pocket passer, if he doesn't have a great offensive line around him, I don't see it ending well. So most teams that draft quarterbacks in the first round typically don't have good offensive lines. Reference Jacksonville Jaguars. It's situations like that where you're gonna get beat up. Cincinnati Bengals when they took Joe Burrow, and I know they went deep playoff run, but their offensive line still leaves something to be desired. So unless you're a Joe Burrow talent, and I don't see it with Sam Howell, you're gonna get feasted on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at some of these guys, and that it's the gift and the curse of selecting a quarterback in the first round because now the trend is like in the old days, a quarterback might sit for a year because you typically get a new head coach and you want to try to give him some time to get acclimated. But now with these rookie deals, and coaches don't have the long-term job security that they once upon a time did, you want to go out there and see how quickly what you have with that pick. And I think that's the one thing I worry about with some of these guys because I think for the most part, the guys that we've talked about so far, they're developmental projects. To me, I think my personal opinion, I think Kenny Pickett is the most pro-ready quarterback out of this group. Do I think Kenny Pickett should be a starter from week number one? Absolutely not. That's why I think, him going to a team like Pittsburgh is good because at least you have Trubisky. At least, and it's unfortunate, with the passing of, Dwayne Haskins several days ago because he was probably going to be a guy that was going to, compete for that starting job as well. And it's so tragic, that he's no longer with us. So and because of that, I think the onus is going to be on Pittsburgh more to take a quarterback. But like just let's just say if they take Pickett, it's like, okay, at least, we have Trubisky. And at the very least, Trubisky could start at least 6 or 7 games for the Steelers until this kid gets his feet wet. And let's say that Trubisky thrives enough off of that competition to keep the Steelers relevant in the AFC North. That, of course, gives Pickett more of an opportunity to go out there and say, hey, let me get myself up to speed with the program a little bit more before I get my feet wet. So That's to me, I think it's the biggest thing because it's not a Peyton Manning situation where you know this guy's gonna be plugged in as a starter from day one as soon as you draft him and give him a jersey and hat at the press conference. No. So that to me, I think is the biggest thing with all of these guys. And I think they would all benefit from from having that clipboard in their hands to come week one. Another guy I want to talk about is Desmond Ritter out of Cincinnati. Now he's 6'3", 211. He's a winner. He went 44-6 as a starter in 4 years at Cincinnati. To me, the two games I look at, he got to the New Year's Six after the 2020 season. He played Georgia, and then he helped Cincinnati to an undefeated season this past season. They got to the college football playoff, and they lost to Alabama. So you're talking about the last two national champions, not in the year that he faced them, of course, but the last two teams to get to the national championship. And you think about or win the national championship, and you think about all of the first rounders that those schools have produced on the defensive side of the ball. And of course, Alabama, they're going to have their fair share of defensive guys this year, but so is Georgia. And Georgia might actually have more on that side of the ball that are taken early on in this draft. In those two games, he didn't play bad, but he didn't play great either. And for me, it's telling because you know what? He stood in there and took his lumps against, the SEC. And you watch him play throughout the years. The kid has heart. He has moxie, and that has to account for something. I'm not saying that he's going to be a franchise quarterback, but I think he's going to be a serviceable guy, meaning is he's not going to go out there and it's not going to be pretty. But the bottom line is he's going to win. And I think because of that, I think he's going to get a legit shot in this league. Do I think he's a first round guy? No. I think he definitely probably will be taken, uh, whether it's round two or three, but he will be taken. And I think he's going to go in there from day one and compete. And I think he's going to be one of those guys, in my opinion, that wins over his teammates.
I can see it. He's like you said, he's a winner. He's got that it factor about him. That it's not something that's a tangible measurement, but he just wins. He kind of runs into the same scenario though as a Malik Willis. You don't play. You're not playing the toughest level of college competition, and when you get to that next level, you're playing the teams at the next level are all guys that would have been studs on the Alabama teams, on the Georgia teams. I mean, these guys are absolute studs. There's no slouches on an NFL schedule, even the worst team. So it makes you wonder, can he do it? Can he win a gritty game against Chicago Bears, against a Green Bay Packers, against NFL talent? I know he held his own against Bama. I know he held his own against Georgia. And to his credit, some of that is due to, they're coming out with 24 5-star guys. And he doesn't have that. He's not throwing to a bunch of 5-star receivers. He doesn't have a bunch of 5-star offensive linemen blocking for him, to his credit. And he was able to hold his own. So that gives me hope. But that would be my big question. Same as Malik Willis. You didn't play the toughest competition in college, except for a handful of games. How will that translate to the next level?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing right here. And I think this off season as a whole, between free agency, trades, and the draft, it's showing you the importance of having a stud at the quarterback position because let's be realistic. Gone are the days where we're gonna have a quote unquote Trent Dilfer game manager out there where you can say, you know what, just give us 10 points, our D is gonna take care of the rest. Those days are over. You need a guy who can make plays at the quarterback position. And I think, this past year, in the playoffs as a whole, we saw that. I mean, you look at the 49ers, as an example of this. The D bailed out Jimmy G in the wild card win over Dallas. The D bailed him out in the cold against Green Bay. But then, of course, when you got to the NFC Championship game and when they needed him to make plays, just like they needed him to make plays a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl, he couldn't do it. And then, because of that, we've seen how much that, teams are willing to give up and how much teams are willing to spend on quarterbacks. Listen, we saw what Cleveland gave up for Deshaun Watson, and that's in spite of the fact that there's still a good possibility that he misses a chunk of the season, because he's probably going to be suspended by the NFL. Again,
Mhm.
going back to Russell Wilson, we see the tags, how much money that, some of these premier quarterbacks are getting. And it's like you look at it, especially from the AFC side compared to the NFC side. And it's like, with that said, you can't blame a guy like Tom Brady for just being willing to come back to Tampa, because it's like, if you're looking at it and you're over there and you're like, wow, the only quarterback I really have to worry about on the NFC side right now is Matthew Stafford. I like my chances. Whereas on the AFC side, you have so many quality quarterbacks, but it just shows you like the difference between the haves and the have nots. And not to sound, redundant, I really feel bad for any front office out there that's going to go into this draft and say, "Hey, I need to go find me a franchise quarterback." You're not going to find them this year, and it's unfortunate.
No, I agree. This is not the year to be looking for a franchise quarterback. It just isn't.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, and with what some of these teams have, and not to sound too repetitive, but just like, just what they've given up as far as what they're, trying to angle to get themselves in this position. And it's, it's amazing. I mean, we've seen, some years where there are like 5 or 6 guys taken, most of them pan out and most of them don't. You think back to several years ago with Josh Allen, he's been the guy from that draft along with Lamar Jackson that were taken in the first round. And go figure, they were the two guys that had the biggest question marks. Of course, Josh Allen had the arm injury his last year at Wyoming, and then of course, people weren't like really sure about Lamar Jackson being a franchise quarterback. They've been the guys that have held their own. Of course, Baker Mayfield, he's on his way out in Cleveland. Sam Darnold, he's fizzled out. Josh Rosen, I mean, he's on his third team, and possibly, he's got a foot out the door in the league. But with that said, very very quickly, I know we wanted to talk about the quarterbacks, but is there a player in general that you think is going to like really has standout ability in this draft, regardless of his position early on? AJ, I know who you're itching to talk about, so I'm gonna let you get to that though.
Honestly, nobody. There isn't anybody that A few years back, Chase Young was a guy that was like, he's NFL ready, and he's going to be an everyday player. I don't see anybody in the draft and I'm like, yep, that's an NFL player. That is a league ready player. I don't see anybody that strong, that fast, or that IQ ready. So,
Okay.
and you guys might both disagree, and I'm sure that I'm wrong, because they're, out of 200 picks,
Somebody's got to play.
somebody's got to play, but there's nobody to me that stands out to that degree, like a Chase Young or like Cam Newton or like Lamar Jackson or and Marino or Elway back in their day. I could go on and on and on and on, but like there's nobody I see in this draft that I'm like so confident in. I just want my team to pick a quarterback or two and pit him against Goff and give Goff a little bit of a run for his money. That's it. So, yeah.
If I had to say, I'd Kayvon Thibodeau and man, I'm gonna say it, Aiden Hutchinson. But I know. When you compare him to Chase Young, I question Aiden Hutchinson. I'd like to put his name out there. I think he could, but it's hard for me to have a whole lot of faith in him coming out of Michigan.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just something about it where it's like I could easily see him being a flop. If let's say the Lions take him at 2, I could easily see him being a flop. It just and I don't know why. You know what I mean? He just doesn't have that intensity, and he just doesn't have it like Chase Young had it. But Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon, he seems to be the real deal. I know they got questions does he take plays off and stuff? I don't see it. I don't think so, but
Well, this is a two-part thing. First and foremost, Andy, I'm taking it back to the fifth grade because you stole my answer. You stole my answer. That's number one. And AJ, you gave the answer or Andy basically gave the answer that I expected you to give.
Right.
So that's why I said I had a feeling where this was going.
So I immediately went against the grain. Yeah.
But I mean,
Try to throw you off, man.
I mean, nonetheless, I think early on we're going to see some big uglies taken because you look at it with Jacksonville, for starters, you know, Trevor Lawrence is their future, and you have Doug Peterson as a new head coach. So obviously, you have to protect Trevor Lawrence. And I go back to what I said last year when he was drafted. Right kid, just wrong team because Trevor Lawrence can play. But it's just, I don't think that we're ever going to see his full potential, at least not in a Jacksonville uniform. And you just hope that he's not ruined a la how David Carr was when he was drafted by the Houston Texans once upon a time. But for me, I could see Detroit at number 2 going with either Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau, just because you think about Dan Campbell and he has that old school, rah-rah type of mentality behind him. And the thing is like with that said, you got to build up front. You got to build with the offensive line. You got to build with the D line. And of course, last year we saw the Lions take Penei Sewell, in the first round. And then I think this year they definitely go Kayvon Thibodeau or Aiden Hutchinson. And I think, Aiden Hutchinson, I know he's not a quarterback, but I think he's going to be a guy that if the Lions do take him, it's going to help people. It's going to help them sell tickets because it's like obviously people in the Detroit region, they're very familiar with him due to his career at Michigan. One thing that, might stand out for some scouts is, he and that Michigan defense really didn't have a good Orange Bowl against Georgia. But to me, I don't think it was any fault of Aiden Hutchinson. The thing was, you looked at how he got doubled, in that game by that massive Georgia offensive line. Georgia, to their credit, they went up tempo a lot on offense, and basically they used the strengths of Aiden Hutchinson against him because what was his strength? He has a high motor. He has the ability to get up the field. And what happened? Basically, they allowed him to rush himself out of the play on pass plays, and then the quarterback just had a crease and he was off to the races. But nonetheless, I think he has the potential. I don't think he's a generational talent at the pass rusher position, definitely. But I think it's gonna once again, it's gonna come down to fit, So it's gonna be okay. Who else are the Lions gonna get on that D line? Who else are the Lions gonna get in that front seven? That's gonna be the biggest thing for him, whether it's gonna be him or Kayvon Thibodeau. But I'll tell you like this: if it comes down to him and Kayvon Thibodeau, I think it's Aiden Hutchinson. I really for the Lions at least in number 2.
I don't like that, William. I hope they take Kayvon too. I just don't like it. It's a classic Lions move to take the home state guy, and I could just
and that's why I'm saying it.
God, I don't like it. It just
and the reason
it doesn't feel right.
The reason that you said is exactly why they would take it, and I don't want to see that. That makes no sense.
That shouldn't
at
be
all.
the reason you take somebody.
Yeah, because
at all.
I'll tell you what, especially for that franchise, the Detroit Lions, trust me, have no problem selling tickets. Okay, they have such a loyal damn fan base to a fault. There's something to be said about Philly fans and Boston and all that in New York. They're loyal, but they're smart. Detroit fans, we don't know any better. All right, that's all we got. We got one team. We got one Detroit Lions team. We got one football team, and we stick with them because there's nothing better to do in Michigan during the wintertime. All right,
Well,
go to Ford Field. So they sell tickets, and it's silly. So to take Hutchinson because you think, oh yeah, he's going to sell a hometown guy. He's going to sell some tickets. No, don't take. Oh, get me all fired up, man.
Give me Thibodeau, please, please.
Well,
Exactly.
I listen. I will say this though. Obviously, hope springs eternal every single year. I mean, you think about it. Cub fans, they did it for more than 100 years before they finally, got to see a World Series. And I mean, of course, not giving away my age, but I mean, the last time that I saw the Lions win a playoff game, I was in the sixth grade. And the year before that was the last time that I had seen the Cincinnati Bengals win a playoff game prior to this year. So just saying, hopefully, you never know. Obviously, the Bengals situation was a lot different, but I mean, still, you get Aaron Rodgers back at Green Bay, but that division, to me, I think is still a little open because Green Bay is not the same team. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But I mean,
Yep.
listen, stranger things have happened. And I mean, Dan Campbell, to me, I think he's a head coach that he'd be great for high school football. You know, he, I really do. I mean, he reminds you of like that high school strength coach, high school, O-line coach, wrestling coach, or whatever like that. That's gonna get in your tail and make you a better player. I just don't see him as an NFL coach, and I said that from day one. And that's no disrespect to Dan Campbell. I remember Dan Campbell when he was at A&M. I also remember him. He got to the Super Bowl. He was on the Giants in 2000. He was a backup to Pete Mitchell at the tight end position when they got to the Super Bowl. And then after that, he finished up with Dallas, when Jason Witten's first couple of years in the league. So, he did enough to hang around the NFL. I think he's a solid position coach, but, head coach nonetheless, I don't see it. That's why I just see them, going with Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, I'm not a betting man. Obviously, you guys think, Thibodeau is their guy. I just see them doing it because it's a typical Lions move.
I just hope that's not what's in their mind. That's the reason, is to sell tickets. Because what a stupid idea. You have so many holes in your team, and selling tickets ain't one of them. You got a bunch of players, you got a bunch of needs at every position, and yeah. What about your Jets and Giants? What do you think there?
Well, for me with the Jets, I think they're doing what, and I mean, I'm not a Jet fan, but I will say this. I think they're doing what most teams are trying to do right now, which is, you get the quarterback early and then you make sure that you try to put talent around them. I mean, we saw them take CJ Ozoma and pick him up in free agency, of course, a tight end for the Bengals. And, the Jets have those two picks early. So maybe, they could do something with them. The Giants, on the other hand, I think the Giants, they have a chance right here to do something good for a change. And I could tell you, in the New York area, that a lot of people are really, they're not thrilled with the Giants franchise right now because Giant fans haven't seen this type of ineptitude on the gridiron since the 1970s. And one thing I'll say about both the Jets and Giants, and the Lions come into this factor as well. Jim Mora, the former NFL head coach, said this once upon a time. When you miss on a top 5 or top 10 pick in the draft, it sets your franchise back about 5 years because you've invested so much for that position. And the Giants, towards their tail end of their Super Bowl runs from about a decade ago, they started being unable to draft good. And I think it started with the David Wilson injury. You remember they drafted him. He was a running back out of Virginia Tech in 2012, and he had a neck injury. And right after that, it was just a cascade of bad picks. And I think we're seeing that right now, especially with the Daniel Jones pick. Saquon Barkley, I think, was a good pick, but the problem is you don't have anybody to protect him. So I really think that, he has the opportunity. If he can go to another team, we can then see what he can do. But nonetheless, the Giants they got two picks early. They have their own and they have the Bears. If I'm the Giants, what I would try to do, see if a team wants to move up. But the problem is there's no quarterbacks to take because you could come back and get some more draft capital and get another first round pick for next year per se. So I think being with that said, I think the Giants use both of their picks. I think I could see them if Kayvon Thibodeau's there or Aiden Hutchinson, I see them going with one of them. But I also see them taking one of these offensive tackles in this draft. Maybe Evan Neal if he's available, maybe Charles Cross, because whomever the starting quarterback is for the Giants, you got to protect him. That's the biggest thing for them. And I think Giant fans, they might not want to hear this, but there's some excitement. The Giants have a new general manager right now, Joe Shane, and they have a new head coach in Brian Daboll, and everybody's looking at how Buffalo's offense looked, last year. But the bad news is Brian Daboll didn't bring Josh Allen with him, to the New York area. So I think Giant fans have to be understanding and say, hey, you know what? This is not going to be a quick fix because we've been bad for so long. And, with the Jets and Giants, it's kind of like the Mets and Yankees in New York. It's like, the Yankees, of course, are the gold standard for baseball in the New York area as compared to the Mets. And, the Jets fall under that same umbrella. But honestly, the Jets right now are in a better position to compete for next season, depending on what they do in the draft. I just think the biggest thing that is going to hinder the Jets, Kyle Wilson's not a guy that's going to put a team on his back. Like a lot of these young quarterbacks, is who you put around him. But also with that said, there's just so much talent on the AFC side. It's stacked. I mean, let's be realistic. Kansas City has dominated the AFC for several years. They've dominated the AFC West. There's a pretty good chance they don't even win that division. There's a pretty good chance they finish in last place in that division just based off of what everybody else in that division has done this offseason. Then, you still got New England, you still got Buffalo. Can Miami be a factor? Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore. 'Cause I mean, and to Cincinnati's credit, they've beefed up their offensive line to try to protect Joe Burrow. So you're looking at it. I mean, you still got Tennessee, you got the Colts with Matt Ryan. So I think that's the biggest thing for the Jets. They could improve, but I'm not sure if they're going to be able to improve enough to be a postseason team.
Right on. Thanks, William.
Well, thank you guys. And I mean, as always, it's a pleasure to have you guys on here. And while we have the time, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell everybody else. If there's anybody out there that you want to show some love to, you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
Hoffman, you're a public address announcer.
Well, we just want to thank our personal sponsors, Curveball Collectibles, Mike Wilson out there at Curveball Collectibles. He's at
166 Center Road.
Thank
Saginaw.
you for memorizing the address. I'm
Right.
terrible with numbers. That's my journalism, math, and numbers. 166 North Center Road in Saginaw, Michigan. Curveball Collectibles. Also, the Chemical City Paper right here in Midland. They're good friends of ours, Michael Westendorf, and and of course our own show, our own podcast, the Small Market Podcast. We're on all platforms, anywhere you can find podcasts. That's where you can listen to us. Last 2 weeks we've had some pretty good shows. We had Dale Scott, the first openly gay umpire in all of sports.
Yep.
He was on our show. And who was the other one we're talking?
James Moore. 1988 Rose Bowl champion.
For the Spartans.
For the Michigan State Spartans.
Yeah. So he had a great story about redemption, getting in trouble with drugs and alcohol and then coming back, and he's got a positive message to kind of spread out there. So both those shows, they're out now. Great stories. And thanks a lot, William, for being a good friend, being a good pal, and just having like the wealth of knowledge that you have. 300 pounds of sports knowledge.
Well, I mean, I've had to scale it back in the gym, elbow injury and, wear and tear with age. I'm not going to give away my years, but you know what?
Yeah.
The old saying goes.
Me too. That's what happened to me too, man.
Father time is undefeated, man. That's all I'm going to say. But, as always, trust me, truly a great pleasure. Very privileged to have you on here. I always appreciate the time that we have because it's just a very, easy podcast, with you guys because it's so easy to get a consistent back and forth from so many different aspects of whatever topic, that we're covering. I mean, we started with the quarterbacks, but at the same time, it's like, hey, let's sprinkle a little, top 5, top 10 action in there to see, who, has a potential to do something in this draft. And, once again, I just thank you guys for that.
We appreciate you having us on, William.
And, very quickly before I sign off, I want to take this time to give a special shout out to someone. 18 years together with my wife today. Very happy for that. And you know what?
Congratulations.
Thank you. And like I said last year at 17, let's get ready for the next 17. So today, let's get ready for the next 18. And as always, folks, want to thank you for taking this time out to checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. If you like what you heard and saw tonight, please feel free to hit the like button as well as the subscribe button on this channel. Also, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line to be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. And just quickly before I sign off, AJ and Andy, I promise you the next time I'll switch it up. I know you probably were surprised that I went for a Detroit Pistons jersey the last two times that we've done this. It was just, just picking something random. But next time I'll try to switch it up for you guys. But you know what? At the same time, you still feel at home seeing that Pistons jersey behind me.
Nothing wrong with having the mayor back there, man.
And with that said, my name is William Martin signing off. And for AJ and Andy, thanks once again and have yourselves a wonderful day.